Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm McKenna from Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas, and I'm excited tonight to be joined by two authors that I actually have never met in person, so it was lovely to get to meet them virtually tonight. We have Bryan Christy and Alma Katsu joining us, and I'll bring them on in a few minutes, get them introduced properly. But as those of you are joining our conversation with your live notifications, I just want to mention a few things that are coming up. So if you are a Murder by the Box subscriber, we just got our Cozy Corner subscription sent out yesterday. So hundreds of books are winging their way to you with Cozy Corner. We should get Bust of the Month sent out a little bit later this week, and then Crime Fiction Legends early next week. We also have a very exciting Saturday coming up. April 24th is Independent Bookstore Day. We already have the limited edition Independent Bookstore Day tote bags available. They're $10. We can sell those ahead of time, but we're going to have lots of really cool special Independent Bookstore Day merchandise on that Saturday, including a special Baby Yoda onesie. And then Blackwing pencils that say I love independent bookstores. That's the thing I'm most excited about. A special signed Nigella Lawson cookbook, and a lot of other Indie Bookstore Day exclusives. So that's pretty exciting. We'll be doing a free mug giveaway that says Poison on it with a $100 purchase. And we also will be hosting the Edgar Awards Best Novel nominees, all 6 of them from all over the world, at 1 o'clock that day virtually. So mark your calendars. Okay, that's all from me for now. Let me bring on the people of the evening. So we have Bryan Christy here. Hi, thanks for being here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on your new book, In the Company of Killers. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and get you introduced, although I'm guessing some of the people tuning in already know who you are, but here goes nothing. Bryan Christy is the former head of special investigations at National Geographic and the 2014 National Geographic Society Rolex Explorer of the Year. His criminal investigations have been the subject of 2 award-winning National Geographic documentaries, and his crime writing has been anthologized in the Best American Science and Nature Writing. He's the author of the nonfiction book, The Lizard King. His education includes Penn State, Cornell's FALCON program, University of Michigan Law School, Tokyo University Law School, and time at the Iowa Writers Workshop. And as I said, your brand new book is In the Company of Killers, and we do have signed book plates to go along with that. I'm going to put a link in the comments right now where you can click to purchase copies of it or copies of Alma Katsu's Red Widow. And speaking of Alma, there she is. Hello.
Hi.
Good evening. So Alma Katsu is the award-winning author of 5 novels, most recently The Deep and the Hunger. This is old, I'm sorry. Most recently Red Widow. Prior to the publication of her first novel, she had a 35-year career as a senior intelligence analyst for several U.S. agencies, including the CIA and NSA, as well as RAND, the global policy think tank. Katsu is a graduate of the Master's Writing Program at the Johns Hopkins University and received her bachelor's degree from Brandeis University. She lives outside of Washington, D.C. with her husband, where she's a consultant to government and private industry on future trends and analytic methods. And as I already mentioned, Red Widow is your most recent book. We did an event for you with that, for that a few weeks ago, and that can be found on YouTube or archived here on Facebook if you're interested in going back and watching that as a viewer. But tonight, Alma's going to be our guest interviewer for Bryan and his new book. So I'm very appreciative of that. If you're watching and you have questions, please put them in the live chat if you're on YouTube or in the comments here on Facebook. We also still have signed book plates to go along with Red Widow, which can be found at the same link. Whew, it's a mouthful. Yes, there we go. I'm sorry. As I said ahead of time when we were just talking, we're actually sold out. I went to the table to grab a copy and we were out of it. So otherwise I would have it right here too. But
No worries.
Wonderful.
All right. So you guys have fun. I'm going to be here in the background if you need me, and don't be shy with the comments. We'll get to them in just a little bit.
Thank you very much, McKenna. So I held up my other book, but this is the book we're here to talk about tonight. I'm so excited about this because I've not only read the book, but I've known about Bryan for a little while, and I think we're going to have just an amazing conversation. So let's get started. First of all, congratulations, Bryan. You launched today. How exciting is that?
Yeah, I'm thrilled. This has been a lifelong dream. So to write a novel and be a novelist, and I'm here. So I'm really excited.
When the day finally comes, it's sort of weird, isn't it? I imagine, especially with the pandemic, it might be a little anticlimactic in some ways because you can't like run down the street, visiting your book in bookstores and stuff.
Right. You can't stalk your own book as easily, but I'm just thrilled.
That's wonderful. So we got a lot of ground to cover. So I'd like to jump right into it and get started by asking you if you can just tell us a little bit about the novel briefly. What's it about?
Sure. Yeah. In the Company of Killers is the story of Tom Clay, an investigative journalist with a magazine called The Sovereign. And Clay's job is to travel the world targeting wildlife trafficking kingpins and bring them to the page. Clay has a second life as a CIA asset. He cut a devil's bargain with CIA years ago, and the deal is you give us a little information from your time in the field, and we will give you some intelligence that'll help you make your magazine stories award-winning. But when Clay's best friend is murdered on an anti-poaching operation in Kenya, Clay is offered a new bargain, and that is to go after the murderer and seek revenge. And as Clay does this, what he discovers is that he has long been part of a much bigger game, and his true enemy is much closer to home than he ever realized.
I know it sounds, I know that it is wonderful. It sounds just wonderful. And I know people are going to really be just dying to get into it. And we're going to talk more about the book, but I have a feeling that with your background, people are just dying to really talk about some of your real life experiences first. So we got to go right to your last job. Can you talk to us a little bit about what it was like to be the head of special investigations for National Geographic? Can you just give us like a brief overview of what that job must have been like? Because that's a dream job for most people.
It is a dream job. It was something I couldn't imagine. It was wonderful. I founded Special Investigations, and I'll tell you, I think the best way to handle it is to tell you how it started. I was introduced to an editor at Geographic who said, we want to do a story on Asia's wildlife trade, but we've been having difficulty finding a writer who can deliver that kind of story. If we gave the assignment to you, what would you do? And I'd been working on organized crime in Philadelphia. My background wasn't really animals per se, but I was just finishing up a nonfiction book called The Lizard King about reptile traffickers. And I said, there's only one story. If you want to do Asia's wildlife trade, there's only one story to do. And it's a guy named Anson Wong. He's the Pablo Escobar of wildlife trafficking. He lives in Malaysia. I'd go after him. And they said, well, we don't do crime at this magazine. And I said, oh, of course you do. Every time you use the word endangered species, you're putting a chalk outline around a species, the same as any criminal investigation. You have some other advantages on crime, most crime storytelling. You have incredibly exotic places to go to, and all you're really missing is the villain. And your stories where you talk about endangered species are often make people sad or feel helpless. And I said, let's change this framework. Let's instead of focusing on these victims, focus on the villains. Let's identify these people, go after them, and frame the stories like crime stories, like Law and Order episodes on TV. And let's see what happens. So I set up a 2 or 3 year investigation. I worked for Anson Wong's biggest customer in the United States, sort of as a janitor, sweeping floors, feeding bird-eating tarantulas and snakes and things, working my way up to getting an introduction to Anson. And I got that introduction. We delivered the story, and as a result, when Anson was caught with some wildlife, he went to prison. The government official that enabled him was the subject of an anti-corruption probe. They changed the laws in Malaysia, and when Anson was put before the judge, they cited the story, and Anson got the longest prison term they'd ever delivered in Malaysia for wildlife trafficking. So that was the beginning, and we said, let's make this a model and go.
And that's, it's just fascinating, like, because you must have had such vision. I mean, did you sort of envision from the beginning all the steps? I'm sorry, I'm blowing all our questions right out of the water here, going to the meteor stuff, but I think that's amazing. You go into this and you're able to lay it out all out. Did you know you were going to have to get a job as a janitor, for instance, working for his company? That's amazing.
No, in fact, there are a few stories there, but I think the thing that changed things for me, or that make me a little bit different, is I come to this not as a trained journalist, but as a lawyer, and I wanted to take on stories where I could make. I didn't just want to break or tell it interesting. I did results-oriented reporting. And the idea of results-oriented reporting is to include every element that a decision maker or a prosecutor would need to prosecute the case, whether that's in a courtroom or in public policy or in public awareness. So I identify the criminal, identify the government official that enables that person, talk about the cost to the public and the cost to the species and how close that species is. Then I have I mapped all of that out like a lawyer would. How am I going to make my case to the judge? And the judge, there are a variety of judges for crime-related stories. And to my great satisfaction, we had a lot of impact.
I'm just curious, did National Geographic know this is what they were getting when they signed on? I mean, this here's probably a great story right there too. But I'm going to stop you because I do want to kind of start at the beginning for you, because when I was doing the research to get ready for this, I came across a line that said that you were the first male in your family since 1898 to not become a mortician. Now, when you see a line like that, and then you think of where you are today, right? There's got to be a great story on how you got from there to National Geographic. Do you want to kind of tell us what that path was like?
Well, you're right. My family has been in the funeral business for over 100 years. Every male on every branch that I'm aware of was a mortician. And currently my cousin, who's the first woman funeral director, is running the business.
Excellent.
And I asked, actually, I'm the oldest son of 3 boys, and I asked my father, because I thought it was my responsibility to join the business, and he said no. I think there are other things you want to do with your life, and if they don't work out, you can come back. And that was, in my life, one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given. And I got a ton of support from my parents but still I was afraid. Still I was breaking away from a small town, a family tradition, and I loved to write. I'd written since I was a little boy, but I was afraid to let them down. So instead of pursuing that path, I majored in accounting, and then because it was practical. And,
right.
And then I went to law school, where the dream of writing goes to die. And I practiced law in Washington. I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't my passion. And I had the great fortune, to work for an extraordinary lawyer, Dan Price, who's been on the National Security Council and as advisor in a variety of places. And Dan was incredibly gifted as an attorney, and I was good, but I wasn't that good. But I had the feeling I could be that good at the thing I cared most about. So,
right.
I turned away from that path and followed my dream.
It's funny, I also came from a family that encouraged security. So even though I wanted to be a writer and I did work as a journalist for a little while, I ended up going to work for the Defense Department because it was a secure job. Not back then, and this was a long time ago, not everybody. Now, these days, people like seem to train their whole lives to groom themselves to get a job in intelligence. But back then it was still something that you could sort of luck into. So when I went into intelligence, I had no intention of staying there and making a whole career out of it. It was for the security. And it is interesting, you and I are both coming into our fiction writing, relatively later in life. And I don't know about you, it sounds like, you really are, very gracious for having the opportunity. Same thing for me. I think I probably, it's dearer to me because, I had to come so far. But also we learn a lot, and gather experiences that I think make our writing richer.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and not just the details and crazy stories that you accumulate over time, but the wisdom, to have to have insight and to risk your narrative even in order to deal with important issues. I mean, you do that with the female characters in Red Widow. You didn't have to do that, but you take that on. I found that really moving. So.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I think a lot, and this is one of the questions I want to ask you. For me, it was because if I was going to write a book in this field, that I'd spent my life in, that I felt it had to be for something. And in my particular issue was that women weren't really well represented in spy, fiction and movies and that sort of thing. And so kind of the same thing, we're jumping ahead a little. Let's go back to order because this is going to build a little bit. You've already given us some favorite stories from your time in investigations. Are there any like really real corkers that you want to share with us or not? Maybe that'll only open Pandora's box. I don't know.
Well, I'll give you your first time is always the best. So that Anson Wong story is a favorite, and then probably the story that's gotten the most attention over the years is we wanted to go after a terrorist group operating in Central Africa, the Lord's Resistance Army, and Joseph Kony, that we had information was using elephant ivory to get money, trading ivory for arms. And I wanted to test that proposition. I didn't know if it was true. But he was operating in Sudan, in Darfur, and it's a dangerous place. And I didn't want to go there, and I didn't want to take a team there. And so we did what you would do in a drug trafficking case. Instead of putting a tracker in a suitcase of cocaine, I had a taxidermist build me a fake elephant tusk, and I put a tracker inside that tusk and sent it into the black market in Central Africa, and it got picked up, and we used that to get what the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ed Royce, said was the closest they'd ever gotten to Kony and they'd spent hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And I was arrested as an ivory trafficker during that case. I was going through with the team. So the part that I've told this story many times, but the part of the story I've never told is the team says to me, we're about to go through the airport in Dar es Salaam, and I've got the tusks, fake tusks with transmitters inside in my suitcase. And they say, what if we're caught? And I say, look, I've got that covered. And I reach into my bag and I've got National Geographic baseball caps for everybody. We're all going to wear National Geographic baseball caps. And if they say anything, and look, I have a T-shirt that says Nat Geo on it. And if they say anything, we're going to point to and they say, oh, okay. And the next thing you know, alarms, the suitcase goes through on the conveyor belt, and you guys watching the screen, and it goes through, and you're holding your breath and it goes through and and then you see it back up and stop and it goes back and forth and
your heart's like in your throat. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And he's open your bag and I said, you mean this bag? He said, no, that bag. And I said, look, they're fake tusks. We were doing a project on elephants with National Geographic, and I had something that I could use to show them that they were fake. And many people were gathering around law enforcement and things, and they were looking at the screen. And I said, see on the X-ray, you can see that they're inside the tusks are the electronics. And they said, yes, we see that. These are not tusks. That's a bomb. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So lights were going off and things got very excited.
Oh my gosh. Listening to you, it's the funniest thing. It's like, I've certainly been privy to these complex intelligence operations that, take so long to plan and have so much oversight, and you feel like you're never going to get there because, you have so many hoops to jump through. It sounds like you have comparatively such freedom. Like you can dream up these operations and you can do them. What was that like?
It was extraordinary. I mean, geographic. I was an explorer, which is sort of special designation that it's like being a fellow with a university or something. But they're basically going to back you if you've proved that you know what you're doing. And if you come up, and they really support crazy ideas. If you want to bring up the Titanic, if you want to, go to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, these are stuff they'll get involved in. And
you must have tested their patience, though. I gotta say, right? They probably were like, "Oh, that Bryan guy."
There were a few questionable. There were some things. Let's say this: there were some things that I did or wanted to do that never made any magazine article or documentary. Fortunately I called I would call just before I was about to do something and say, I'm just checking if this would be okay. And management changed while I was doing these things, and the new management was very seasoned journalists. And the first time I proposed one of these sort of crazier ideas, the response was, I'm going to bring you home right now.
And that's when you started asking for forgiveness instead of permission, right? Yeah.
I don't mention that part. Yeah.
Wow. I have to say I'm kind of jealous. That's pretty amazing. I'm going to stop you now, though, and I'd like to turn back to the book. So this is something I've been dying to ask. I love the question of how much your main character, Tom Clay, is based on you and your experience, because as I was reading the book, of course, knowing a little bit about you, that was just running through my mind all the time. What would you have to say to people who ask you how much of Tom Clay is you?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of fiction, because you're probing your subconscious as you write, and it's hard to know how much of Clay in particular. Obviously, his career and the things he's doing tracks what I did, and he had a much darker past. His mother was murdered early in his life. My mom visited a few weeks ago, and so that's very different. His family had.
Why did you kill me in your book?
Yeah, yes. She's thrilled for me. She was my inspiration to write. So, but yeah, I also use Clay as a vehicle to probe, as one does in fiction, my own internal landscape, and so there, and some of that is things that probably is my personality and is the personality of men I've met, and in some cases is personality of things I've seen particularly now in the country, that I wanted to explore. I see men doing, and in some cases, some egregious stuff. And I wanted to have a pretty tough guy who is internally aware and really process some of that stuff, because most thrillers really gloss over that, and it's a real shame. It makes for lesser books.
It is. And I think I'm finding that readers are really hungry for that. I mean, that's why they're interested in having someone like yourself write a book, and because you can be thoughtful about it and really explore, all of the ethical, moral dilemmas, that come along with the position. And that's what I found too in writing my book, that, that's not only was what I wanted to explore, but that's what readers wanted to explore too. So, given, some of your experiences that you talked about, and, what you just mentioned, whereas, writing fiction also gives you a little bit of freedom, escape from the constraints of what, your life was, the, facts of your life. Can you talk about how you decided what were the types of things you were going to put in the book and what kinds of things you were going to keep out? Because your book covers a lot of stuff. I mean, it's not just about wildlife and, poaching and that sort of thing. It's quite international in flavor. It's got a lot in there. So how did you decide what it was going to contain?
Not be a wildlife book. The opening scene is wildlife, but other than that, wildlife doesn't really play a role. It's about global forces at work in places I've been. I was moved early on by the work of John le Carré, Cold War work, Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and he took on throughout his career big issues. He had, and you'll appreciate this from the work you've just done, he had the good fortune to have a Cold War in place. So he didn't have to defend or explain who the enemy was. Everyone knew it's Russia, and all he had to say was, my Lamus is looking over the bridge at Checkpoint Charlie, and everyone knew what that meant and what East Germany was. We today, storytellers, if we want to take on big global issues, we have to define those issues first, and explain to people in a lot more detail. But I had seen, as an investigator in these countries, big, powerful forces. And this is where the title comes from. We are in the company of killers, powerful forces that often feel too big to do something about. And when I ask myself, okay, what's the Cold War of the moment? Certainly one of the things that comes up immediately is China and the rise of the militarization in the South China Sea. And that I wanted to make that one element of the book. I'd spent a lot of time in all the countries around that region, and I had a sense for how important that was. And I wanted to have the book, in the way my journalism did, sort of underscore that for people, to bring it to people's attention.
Yeah, I have to give you credit for wanting to take on complex issues and tell stories about them in ways that, make them more readily understandable to the average person, because that's quite a challenge. So kudos to you. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the relevant themes in the novel, as sort of an extension of what you were just talking about. But maybe you can think about too, because I'm sure folks are curious, why you decided you wanted to write a novel. You've spent so much time in your life in nonfiction. You've already written one nonfiction book. You did a lot of journalism. What was it that you felt you could tell better in a novel than you could? Because I'm a novelist too. I believe that's true. There's just a lot of truths that people grasp more readily in art than they do in fact. So I don't know if you've thought much about this, but why a novel now?
Yeah, sure. And it's a great question. And, they say truth is stranger than fiction, but I think fiction can be more honest. You can look at the interior spaces of characters that you can't get into in nonfiction. When I'm doing an investigation, I'm really drawing a line through through facts and things that I uncover. And if that investigation is successful, I will have found items that no one else has found, and I'll have made connections that no one else has. Fiction, but I can only connect what I can prove and what I can get past the lawyers at the magazine. Fiction allows me to connect things that I am very aware of, forces that are operating, in this case in Africa, American forces, for example, that I know are connected, that I know or have a connected impact on communities and Americans. And in fiction, you can connect them without having to make that proof, because they are connected. And so that was another driver for me to turn to fiction. But I just love the interior life of characters, and I love seeing what, as you're writing, your subconscious puts on the screen in front of you, and you just never saw it coming, and you're just like, oh, there's mystery inside me.
Right.
Right. And I just love that.
So I'll ask you a classic question then. Are you a plotter, or are you, as they say, a pantser, somebody who, do you intricately plot out your novel in advance?
I graph it. So I do a lot of diagramming, and I use some software to do that, same as I did my investigations. And when I can see a line through the narrative, then I feel okay to start. And I'll tell you, in the case of this book, I had a line that I saw through some very big events and things, and I worked very hard on that. And then I looked at it and I said, no. And I threw that out, and I did it again and again and again and again, until I found that I felt like everything fit in an authentic way. And I'd say a mixed bag.
Yeah. Well, I'm fascinated though. So can you tell us what program you use? You said you use sort of like a graphing program. Can you share your secret?
Yeah, I can't remember what it is. It's a really just a primitive, basic Smart Draw. I use Smart Draw, which is you might use to diagram corporate systems. It's just standard, straightforward flowchart diagramming. But I use it's really nice, and it where writing an outline forces you to think in a linear fashion. Drawing it gives you this 360 perspective. It's really helps me.
I'm going to have to give that a try. I don't know how it happened, but over the years, especially in writing the historical horror, since there's so much research that goes into the books, I started just using spreadsheets for everything. Of course, as an analyst, I prefer spreadsheets. So I actually even plot in spreadsheets, but it is linear, like you say, and I have to rely on my memory to sort of be able to juggle and it's a chart. So, you can have relational things, embedded in it. So if you have multiple POVs like I do and all that kind of stuff, but I'm always looking for something better.
Well, my wife is pointing across the room to the giant whiteboard that I have on one wall. And so that we do, those are my two things I use to diagram, that the whiteboard, and to be able to look at the whole story in one shot has really been helpful for me. I was stuck for a long time when I was just outlining, because I'd lose the thread of my own work, and that.
Well, it's a complex book. I mean, it's a complex book. It's not a simple plot line. So have you, readers love to see insights into your process and stuff. Have you thought about like taking pictures of your whiteboard as it's in progress to kind of share with your readers, what your journey's like? You should think about that.
All right, I'll think about it.
I'd love.
I'm still very secretive, because everything at Geographic, when I was doing our operations, we had a firewall around everything the special investigations did, so that no one at Geographic could tap in, because people have relationships and they might accidentally share something, and and I'm trained. My original training in investigations was an FBI undercover agent who's my uncle, and so just you saying that makes me think.
Yeah.
I did it.
I was in intelligence, believe me, I understand.
Yeah.
But the hard lesson I had to learn, and I was discussing this with Karen Cleveland, who's also ex-CIA, and she wrote a novel. She has another one coming out soon. But I'm a little further along down in my writing career than she is, and she's still like, she was telling me that she has a hard time opening up on social media. She has a hard time, and it's hard not to just have that stiff, presidential briefing when you're doing events like this. It's just hard to break that down. But you're going to find, because our next question is about what's next, you're going to find that readers want more of you, right? They're going to want to see. So you're going to have to work on that, Bryan. So let's go.
I'll work on it.
Yeah, I know. But, so what's next? The obvious question is there another Clay novel in the works? But, you're a lawyer. Lawyers write legal thrillers too. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of opportunities out there for you. What are you thinking about doing?
Well, I'm going to stick with Clay, certainly for this next book. And I'm already well into it, and I'm really excited about it. So I'm looking forward to seeing. He's got his chart already, and
well, the second novel is usually the hardest. You've probably heard that because you have as long. Sorry, I don't want to jinx you, but that's what a lot of novelists say, and it was painful for me because you have all the time that you need to write the first one, and then for the second one, I mean, editors are forgiving, and if you miss a deadline, they'll extend it, but you feel this constraint. And like a lot of us, we don't really know how we did the magic the first time around. You write one novel, you know how to write one novel, and so the second one is usually the scariest, and then it gets less and less scary. But it sounds like you're very disciplined, and you're going into this sort of having a plan and being able to execute the plan. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I feel like I learned a ton this first time, and when I combine that with the journalism career, I'm feeling in pretty good shape for Clay. I mean, he's going to have some trouble, but I think I'm all right.
So, do you have a pub date for the next book? Or delivery date? When are you delivering the manuscript? No pressure.
I actually do not know. I probably shouldn't say that, but I don't know.
Mark will let you know when you get close.
Yeah, Mark will let me know. Yes.
Okay. And are you thinking of doing any nonfiction too, or are you one of those guys that sees this the thing that's right in front of you and doesn't worry about what's behind it too much?
I think, I have a lot of friends in the journalism space, and I love collaborating with Geographic. You're always collaborating with a world-class photographer. And so there may be some work in that regard, but in general, I'm in the novel, and, it's a craft, and I gave it a shot years ago, and that shot didn't play out. And so I went into journalism, but it's always been my life's plan to come back to it, and I came back anticipating that it would take me a little while to learn the craft, and I've been 3 years on it, and I'm feeling good.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like muscle memory. I think a lot of novelists, a lot of fiction writers feel the same way. You build up that expertise. It's like once you're getting published, with a traditional publisher, it's like being a professional athlete, and you're really loath to slack off. So believe me, I totally understand. I kind of think we're at the Q&A section. McKenna, did you say you have some questions for Bryan?
I did say that. This has been super fascinating to sit back and listen to, though. So we have a question early on. Do you think your journey led to your success?
Yeah, I would say, look, it's funny. So Alma correctly points out, I had a very clear path in mind when I was in college. I was going to go accounting. Once I decided I wasn't going to follow my dream, I was accounting, law, DC lawyer, maybe some politics, but really a powerful DC lawyer working the government. I did a little work with a senator from Jersey and worked in the executive office of the president. And, my father got sick and passed away midway in that plan, and it jolted me off track. And that is what liberated me, but also led me to make connections and really live my life for the first time. So that path, it meant everything.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, the reason I came back to writing after being away from it for so long was I got really, really sick at 40, to the point where they weren't sure I was going to be able to continue in my job. And that's when it kind of forces you, I probably like what you went through, to think, do I want to live my life and not do what I really want to do? No. And, there's where the road forks, and which fork are you going to take? And it's amazing once you make that decision where it can lead you.
Yeah, I wish there was a way our education system could impress that upon young people, because, there's so much pressure to plan it all out, and you just become a cog in a machine that doesn't care about you ultimately, and you're kind of tricked into feeling like, oh, if I do everything right, things are going to turn out, and unexpected things happen.
You're telling us the truth there. I don't know if people should be listening to that. That's absolutely true, and I don't think you realize that till you're really close to retirement.
Right.
Okay, so we have, speaking of careers, we do have this question. Does Bryan have any actual experience working with the Governmental Intelligence Agency?
I do not. That's a good question. I've been asked that. In fact, I've given some talks on investigative journalism around the world, and one of the things that motivated me to write this book the way I did early on was I was talking for the State Department in West Africa, and the journalist there raised his hand and said, so how, I told him all my good stories and techniques and things that I thought they could use. And he said, so how long have you worked for the CIA? And it was incredible to me that I said, well, I don't work for the CIA, but then I looked at it from his perspective, and I had the privilege of going after guys and then coming home, and to a country that until recently was one of the safest places on earth for a journalist. These guys, if they wanted to do what I was talking about, had to live with it. And it made a lot of sense that his thinking I was CIA, but
some of those guys will ask you that question. They'll ask it of anybody. They'll ask it of nuns. I'm not kidding. I mean,
what do you mean?
They just see, anytime they see something that doesn't quite equate to them, they'll be, oh, well, you must be CIA.
Right. Well, that's absolutely true. And of course, once I did some of the more creative stuff, I did have intelligence community people reach out to me and say, here's how we would do it, or could you help us with this and that sort of thing. And
I would if I had known about you. Yeah.
I'm going to use this as our segue in to talk a little bit about you, Alma, and your newest book, Red Widow.
Oh, yeah. I was really, it was a gift to be able, after writing, 5 novels that were pretty much like supernatural and horror and that kind of stuff, to get the opportunity to write a spy novel. I never thought that would happen, but Sally Kim, my editor at Putnam, encouraged me to give it a go. And it, I always felt very strongly that if people really knew what it was like, what the job was really like, it's not like James Bond or Jason Bourne. It has a lot of very unique challenges. It asks a lot of the people who do the job, and some of the most amazing people work in the intelligence business, and they all do it, completely anonymous. I just thought there'd be a lot of interest in a story like that. So that's what I tried to tell. And here's the book, and I'm really happy to say it's in active development for a TV series with Fox.
Yay!
The last couple of weeks, I'm one of the executive producers. So the last couple of weeks,
that's great.
Just involved in TV talks, and I think we picked our showrunner today.
Oh,
anyway,
wow.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for
Congratulations.
But this is Bryan's day. Let's get back to
I know it's Bryan's day. I will also say that you've kind of shuffled your other books under the rug, but like, for example, The Deep, we all absolutely loved. So lots of good writing coming out of you, and we highly recommend Red Widow. We do have signed book plates for both of the books I mentioned earlier, but if you've tuned in late, there's a link in the comments if you'd like to order. We do have a couple more questions. So this one I'm pretty sure you've essentially covered, but I'm going to put up here just in case there's anything you want to add. After this book, what's next for you? Fiction or investigative journalism?
I'm going to stick with fiction predominantly. And the beauty of this is, some people have said, how could you leave this great job behind? But the kind of fiction I do, I'm going to continue to do everything I did as an investigative journalist and just build on it. So it'll be everything I did plus alpha. And so I'm really excited about it.
Do you get to stay home a little more with your family?
Yeah, we, and of course, novel writing takes so much more time. But my wife is my best editor, and toughest editor I've ever had. And she has endless patience, and it was an extraordinary partnership. So
what a gift to have your wife working with you like that. My husband is a musician. He is not a big fan of words.
My husband too is a musician and not a big fan of words, so I am laughing at that. Yeah, it's funny. Well, it's good. I know you mentioned earlier, Bryan, that your wife had pointed to something, so I'm guessing she's behind the scenes and giving you a thumbs up for that shout out. Were you gonna say something?
Yes, she is, and my chief marketing officer is also here, Claire Leone, and she has been just extraordinary in managing my social media presence and coming up with creative ways to get this story out. Because it's tough. I have a good and kind of compelling personal story, but the book is fresh territory, and fiction. Nonfiction experience does not translate well into the fiction world. I had to start way back at pretty close to ground zero as a fiction writer. Nobody cared about the nonfiction story. It's what's the book, as opposed to nonfiction, where you can kind of say, I've done this before and I have these credentials. And Claire packaged that and continues to come up with creative ways to deliver what I'm about. So I got a good
team. I was about to say, it sounds like you've got a good team. That social media stuff is, you can never overestimate the importance of that. So that's great. Okay. I don't know that you know the answer to this, so I'm going to pop it up here anyway. When will the next novel be out?
I was not anticipating this at all.
This is day one, and people are clamoring for number 2.
I'm very happy they've read the book already. Yeah, I mean, it's I'll be done within the year, is for sure. And I'm on good track to get it done. So I didn't realize your audience becomes your editor.
They love a series. They want to guarantee. Yeah,
I was about to say, you're with Putnam. They love their series, and they like them one a year. So good luck to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question for both of you about reading. And if there are any other questions in the audience, you can probably sneak one or two in before we wrap up. But obviously, you both came to writing not as your primary career, writing fiction. But what books did you read in your formative years? And was there a book that made you think, I want to write, like that's what I want to do? Let's start with you, Alma.
I get this question a lot, and I'm so old I can't remember the books that I read, but I do remember 2 books I read when I was a little kid. One was called Octagon Magic, and the other one was Half Magic. And I didn't find out till recently even that those, I don't remember the author's name, I'm so sorry, but it turns out that both of those books were written by folks who went on to become very well-known science fiction and fantasy writers. And they were just, you know, when you're a little kid and you're 8 years old and you have such a small world. I mean, I came from, you know, a small world. There's no way, another way of putting it. Of course, this was pre-internet, so there was it was hard to find out about the world. You know, a book like that, a well-written fantasy book, can really just, you know, open your mind and open you to possibilities. But you know, when you're little and you read all the time and books are your best friends, I think that's how all of us, you know, that's where authors all come from. You know, we just want to recreate the experience that gave us so much pleasure.
Yeah, that's nice. How about you, Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about the science fiction aspect, the Dune Trilogy with Frank Herbert was certainly one of the early things that I just loved, and I carry with, you know, some of some of the little phrases and things, the Mentat stuff is in my head all the time. I'd say Upton Sinclair was a guy when I read The Jungle, and I saw what a story could do, and how viscerally I felt this is bad, and I was glad that we have new laws and regulations as a result. He was certainly one, and I had a chance to study with James Allen McPherson at the Iowa Writers Workshop, and his work and his mentor Ralph Ellison were really moving for me. And they, you know, Ellison, these are African Americans who have immediate stories of oppression to tell, and I said to McPherson, you know, what can I'm a white male, well-off American, what could I possibly bring to the page that shouldn't be eclipsed by everything you're doing and every minority group and women. I mean, I have the greatest privilege in this country. What can I possibly bring to the page? And he said, look, you've worked in the White House, you've worked in Washington, you've worked in big corporations, you understand that world. You can bring that perspective, you can bring that world to, and it was the first time I didn't feel guilty for what I had done. I felt empowered, and so that really got me going.
Yeah, that sounds like the perfect bit of advice. That's fantastic. Okay, Alma, we do have a question for you, and you should write this down. Someone has solved. It's author Andre Norton from those two books. Someone put who did your two books, Andre Norton. So when you get asked that on your next virtual event, you'll know you'll know who it is. All right, and we have a question for you. Alma, will you continue with Red Widow follow-up books? She loves it.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. The book has really gotten just amazing response, especially from people who've worked in intelligence. I was amazed, like by the second day I was getting emails from people I knew and people I didn't know, mostly women, saying, you know, I can't believe this. This is exactly, I can picture walking down the hall. You know, this is so true to life. So thank you for all the kind words. And yes, I am going to continue. We, Putnam okayed the outline for the proposal for the second book. So hopefully I'll be getting started on that any day now. But the next book to come out will be another historical horror. And that one deals with the Japanese internment during World War II. I am Japanese American. My husband's family is Japanese American. They were all interned. Many, many friends whose family were interned. I think there's a very important story to tell there that kind of reflects on what the country's going through now. So I'm really looking forward to that. And Putnam's really behind it. So that'll be the next book coming out next spring.
Wonderful.
Oh,
yeah. And I love when authors tell an important story, but mix it with fiction. So it's easily digestible for the people who don't necessarily think they need the important story. It's like you trick them into learning about something important. It's wonderful. So I can't wait for that. That sounds just fantastic. We're going to sneak in one last question for Bryan. How do you weave the factual work of government and corporations with fiction? Actually, this is for both of you. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think in my case, I take my personal experience and graft it onto some of the things that my research uncovers and pull it together. I mean, I kind of treat, to the extent I'm writing about a corporation, I think of that as a character and try to fill out all sides of it and get it on the page.
In intelligence work, I know what the things you protect are, and that's sources and methods. So you can't give away classified tradecraft. You can't give away classified, information, particularly the sources who provide that information. But other than that, you can kind of think about, underlying concepts, that sort of thing, and just sort of frame them in a different way. One of the things that was a lot of fun to be able to do after years of not even being able to say the names of my friends whom I worked with is I snuck a couple people in the book from real life. And so they get to see themselves. One of them wants to play himself in the TV show. I don't think that's going to happen. And I was able to dedicate the book to a former coworker of mine who passed away a couple years ago, but we all loved him very much. He was a big Russia expert in the community. And I gave him a promotion. I made him the senior director for Russian affairs at the National Security Council. So it's nice to be able to do those things.
That's terrific. And I will add that I loved that your book came out as someone who knows about what you're writing, but also as a strong female character that is so lacking in that subgenre. So it was a real treat. I'm glad there's going to be another one.
Thank you.
On that note, I'm going to wrap up. I want to mention again, congratulations, Bryan, Pub Day. We got people clamoring for book 2, so get busy. The book is in the company. The book is in the company of killers. We've also been joined by Alma Katsu, whose most recent book is Red Widow. We have signed book plates for both. Link in the comments. And I think that is going to wrap us up for tonight. Thank you both so much. This has been a delight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Bryan, for letting me be part of your special night.
Oh, you were amazing. I really appreciate your walking me through this, except for the part about when's your next book due.
All right. Well, you guys have a great evening. Thanks to everyone for watching. And I think we have about 5 more events of these coming up this week. So check the calendar and hopefully we'll see you on here soon. Bye.
Beautiful. Bye-bye.